Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Fintech Fridays. Super excited to have Costa Ligris on with us. Costa is the founder, CEO of Stabby. I am super pumped, Costa, to kind of dig into what you guys are doing in your space specifically. But before I do that, let's open the show the way I always do. I ask my guests to share your definition of the term fintech and what it means to you, either in your life as a consumer or preferably in your role as founder and CEO over there.
Yeah, so fintech for me is basically technology and software that redefine the way that financial systems and transactions have traditionally occurred. So yeah, because sometimes we get a little heat that like, wait, aren't you guys a prop tech company because you're in the lending, in the mortgage space? Right. And the reality is, no, we're not. We enable financial transactions and more broadly speaking, if I get this right from my marketing department, financial transactions that help people redefine key moments in their lives.
Yeah, and what better way to say it? Key moments in their lives. You guys kind of get in and help solve a problem for consumers and servicers at arguably maybe the most key moment in both entities' lives. And that's a good segue to kind of dive in and just talk about your company, kind of the problem that you sought to solve and how you've gone about doing that. And I think you have turned that part of the business on its ear a little bit.
Yeah, no, thank you. I have to do one technical correction only because I wouldn't be where I am, and I couldn't do this without me. So I'm a co-founder. I do have a co-founder that I started the business with, Josh Feinblum, who's our COO and president, and he oversees all things technical, as well as his background is in cybersecurity and fraud and abuse. So
thank you for that. Thank you.
So, yeah, no worries. It's something that's important to me, and it's just very similar to sort of sometimes when I tell people if they say something like, oh, doesn't so-and-so work for you? That's not nomenclature that's allowed.
That's right.
I work with them. So, yeah. But, yeah, so, it's been interesting, I think, for us. The hypothesis was, of course, to start in the origination space. And for the most part, our products were agnostic. As a matter of fact, our very first product that we rolled out is a middleware that connects banks to their third-party vendors for settlement and title. And so it was really interesting to see the evolution of how this pandemic has changed the world. And that's where the opportunity existed through influencers in the space that really understand servicing to sort of coach us and teach us and show us some of the fragmentation that exists. It's fairly remarkable to me that we live in a time and an era where lenders are still mailing out through first-class mail documents to people to modify their loan documents and their mortgage. So.
Yeah, it's and that's where I loved watching you guys kind of come up. I was at Flagstar when in your early days, so I wasn't directly involved, but I had a sort of second row seat, kind of as you were working with the accelerator and the folks over there. And, of course, our mutual friend, Courtney Thompson, who we'll give her a shout-out here. She's the best. If you haven't looked up Courtney and Consigliera, it's time to do it. She is a dynamo and just a wealth of knowledge. But
you're in servicing and you don't know Courtney, you're not in servicing.
Exactly. You're not in today's servicing, that's for sure.
That's for sure.
Well, let's take a step back and let's talk about exactly, let's not exactly, but let's talk about what Stabby does today in kind of the mortgage ecosystem.
Yeah, so we operate both in servicing as well as origination. And so Stabby is a platform that is designed to connect all of the relevant stakeholders in one place where they have access to all of the necessary tools to be able to take transactions that have traditionally required in-person interactions and or paper interactions, the two obviously going sort of hand in hand, and moving them into a digital platform. So we have your traditional e-sign tools, secure video conferencing, and remote notary tools. One of the big differences between us and some of the other incumbents, which we owe a huge debt of gratitude in terms of having really made electronic notarization, remote notarization a thing, is that we don't provide notaries. We don't manage notaries. We provide technology only to the existing framework. And so in the foreclosure space, so our foreclosure product goes live at the end of this month. And in that product, the banks continue to use their foreclosure legal network, the law firms that they have traditionally operated with. And so they're customers of ours as well. And so that's essentially how we have decided to approach this, which is we don't want to pretend to be experts in 50 states and 3,006 counties. We're a technology company that provides the infrastructure to empower the stakeholders.
And you hit on something. You said they're customers too. So you're basically coming at it from both sides of the table, if you will, right? The lender servicer side, and then the service provider side, and then you're essentially connecting the dots digitally for those transactions that typically would have happened in person and face to face, obviously, to happen in this kind of digital world. And I'm assuming the same applies in the front end for what you're doing in the origination space.
Yeah, so exactly the same thing on the origination side. So our origination customers, depending on what features they want to turn on and off in our platform, we have an integration with Ellie Mae's Encompass loan origination software, and so they can go ahead and place their order through Encompass. They pick their title and settlement provider, and then that title and settlement provider uses Stavvy as the tool to actually schedule the closing with the consumer, be able to conduct the closing remotely, and do it in a place where they have all the tools they need, the video recording to comply with the state RON requirements, ROLONA, or hopefully it's some shorter of the Secure Notarization Act. If it's state specific, we've gotten down to the state level, and so the notary stamps that are generated and created, the requirements for X509 certificates, or whatever it is that's required, Stavvy supports that. And so it really was designed so that the title and settlement industry, irrespective of what they're using for title production software, what operating system they're on, they have a web-based interface that they can use to connect with the consumers, the borrowers, the sellers, the realtors, the lenders.
So understanding what I know about that side of the business in terms of just the notary piece and the signing, it's trying to come into the current century, decade, but it still lags in a lot of areas. That seemed like a risky place to go attack. It makes sense, totally makes sense to go at it, but it seems like you would have had a lot of friction with these antiquated processes and small companies that actually execute on all this. How'd you tackle that challenge?
Well, so that's an awesome question, and I think more importantly, I would sort of restate it, like, how do you tackle that? Because
it's not over, right?
It's not over, and it never will be over. And first and foremost, it really frustrates me when I hear people, and it doesn't matter whether it's a fintech, but in any industry that is a disruptor or a pioneer, they talk about all the things that are absolutely amazing. Yeah. We have had, honestly, the amount of positive feedback, the amount of support from the industry has been remarkable, and that includes like small law firms that you never would have imagined would want to use digital tools. Understanding that, one of my favorite quotes, Gretzky, like, where's the puck going? The puck is going digital. So you either skate in that direction or you're not going to be near the action. And so that's been great. But trust me, for every success story and every supporter, there is somebody that has yet to be converted. And that's okay, because it gives us an opportunity to educate the industry, right? And when you show them and you put your cards on the table, like, look, we have no intention to do what you do.
Right.
I did title and settlement for 17 years of my life in all of New England, brick and mortar operations in New York, New England, Massachusetts, Florida. Been there, done that. Not in. That's what I was going to do. I would have built tech at my old company. My perspective here is there is an opportunity to be a platform that empowers the industry,
right.
And that's what we do. And I think that is a powerful message. And I think when people sort of step back and realize and appreciate all of the things that we are building for them and how we help them migrate, I'll give you an example. If you are a title company in South Florida, we know that real estate is local. You know that, given your background. And so if you're a title company in Southern Florida and you've had people through your network that have done transactions in Orlando or in Tampa or in the Panhandle, outside of your world, right? But now you can sit in your office in South Florida, use Stabby, and not only do transactions in those areas, but you can actually continue to market yourself now as being a statewide provider.
Right.
And so that's powerful.
Yeah, I would guess, in that kind of piggybacking on that statement, the smart, those smaller local firms who may initially have been threatened, the smarter ones are going to look at your platform as a way to grow and scale without necessarily adding a ton of overhead, right?
100%. And I tell people, when I started practicing law, I'm going to age myself, but we did, when we negotiated contracts, the fax machine was the predominant method used.
Right.
I would mark up contracts. I still look at, to this day, red pens all over my desk. I would mark up with my comments, and then we would send it back to them, by fax, and that's how we would go back and forth. But today everything is, redlining and doing it digitally and attaching files to Word, or using, platforms to share larger files. Same sort of thing. Like, we're not here to do anything other than provide you with technology and tools to do that. And so if you're not going to go back to the fax machine, why are you going to go back to the conference room with pens and stamps?
Right. Well, I think from my perspective, where I sit, at FinLocker, let's go back and just talk about the impact of COVID and quarantine, because I've got to imagine that was a sort of pivotal moment for you all, because it has been for us in terms of user adoption and just where consumers are in terms of adopting digital. So let's go back to that, March 2020, when the world changed as we know it. Did you view that right away as good or opportunistic for you, or did it present some challenges initially that you had to kind of set aside and tackle individually?
Yeah. So the initial reaction is like, oh my God. I actually remember being on a flight. I was in the UK, and I was flying back with one of my board members, and we were kind of looking at each other. We boarded a flight from London to Heathrow to Boston, an international flight, boarded in under 5 minutes because there were only like 8 people on the plane or something. And so it was a moment of, I think, like any other traumatic event in anybody's or in our collective lives, there's a moment of like, what is going on here? When I got back, got stateside, I actually went into the office. At the time, we were gracefully and graciously being hosted by Accomplice, a venture fund here in Boston in their offices. It was a really small group of us. And I went into the office and I said to the team, all right, we are going to experiment going remote. I want everyone to go home. We got monitors and equipment for people to go remote. I remember moving stuff out of that office on a weekend. And my co-founder, I think at the time, Josh, was like, I think you're being a little dramatic and overreactive. There's something going on in China, but let's all and I was like, look, there's nothing wrong with just testing this out.
Right.
What would this look like? Entree, our first purchase of a Zoom license. And having a morning stand-up. At the time, there were 6 of us. And so, we went remote, we tried it out, and then it just progressively, obviously, got worse, the pandemic.
Right.
But yes, that was when we saw some of these executive orders start dropping in states that did not have permanent RON legislation. And I actually drafted one for Massachusetts. I was involved in the one in Connecticut. Remember, legal background. When people started coming and asking me for thoughts and advice in this space, you don't turn your back on the industry, even though you don't practice anymore. So That was the moment. That was a pivotal moment where I was like, okay, we need to stand up a product right now that can support these other states, and that's what we did. We rolled out a REN product that allowed you to witness the execution of the documents, record the transaction, do the identity proofing, and we stood that up really, really quickly. We even, at that time, we offered small title agents and law firms, if they're doing like 5 or less a month, there was no minimum. Right. They could just use the platform for free, and they just had to figure out where they're going to store their video after, I think, 6 months or something. I don't remember what it was. But the function of like, we should be there for the industry. We are a technology player in this space. And that's when we really saw the opportunity, and that's when we decided, okay, now it's time to really dive into our e-sign tools and products.
Yeah, as I was thinking about our call this morning, I not knowing, because we haven't talked in a while, just not knowing exactly, I had to imagine that I don't want to say put you on your map. You guys were on the map, but I think it had to accelerate, growth and expansion. And so what do you guys look like today? I mean, are you balanced in terms of front end, back end, in terms of originations and servicing, or do you sit on one, heavier on one side or the other?
Yeah, no, great question. So, and just to be clear, that certainly put us on the map. I mean, there was a period of about 3 weeks where I was doing demos for every major title insurance underwriter and their compliance counsel, and like everyone was really running to figure out like how do we support our customers, and that gave us a tremendous amount of exposure that we would have gotten, but it would have taken a lot longer. Yeah. And in terms of, so where we sit, we're fairly balanced. I suspect actually that in Q1 of next year, what's the old expression? Like, tell God your plans and to make him laugh or something like that, right? And so we have been watching carefully, not just on the servicing side, but more specifically on the foreclosure side, where we think things are going. And so the release and launch of our foreclosure use case in the product, which is very geared towards reviewing and approving affidavits for foreclosure documents and things, we suspect that will have some serious usage in Q1 and Q2 of next year. And we consider that as part of the servicing side of the equation. So I think it'll be fairly balanced. We are now seeing the most activity in terms of both interest, but also onboarding of origination clients. And I do think that I personally believe that the next 3, 4, 5 years, probably the next 4 or 5 years, the majority of transactions will move towards a hybrid equation, not a full digital or raw equation. And so as a result of that, now we're seeing situations where we're talking to lenders like, look, when we started talking to you guys, or when you guys started exploring this even before Stabby existed, it was really hard to try to get you to understand the power of having these tools. But now, especially coming out of this pandemic, hopefully we're beginning an endemic, I think it's really hard to imagine a world where you're not going to leverage some of these tools.
Right. Yeah, without question. It's you said at the beginning, you guys had to rush and get a Zoom license. I mean, what company in the world today doesn't have a Zoom or Teams or whatever, right? Everybody's had to go find those tools, and we'll never go back. We'll always lean on those tools to some degree in our lives going forward.
I've always been, to my demise, a workaholic. I work a lot. It's abnormal. I enjoy it in an unnatural way. Right. But this now changes the paradigm. Like, I used to meet a lot of people in person. And I flew out this week to meet a customer in person, but that is now certainly a rare instance. And it's not based on size of transactional relationship. It's really based on like where we are in the life cycle, where they're located, and all that stuff. But the amount of time that I would spend, do I miss it? Yeah, sometimes. I mean, like being in the car. I was very productive in the car too. Like I'm either listening to CNBC, a podcast, or returning calls. And so. But all that time we spent going from place A to B to C to D, it can really be minimized. I don't think that the world is going to remain completely remote. I am bullish that people will start returning to some sort of a hybrid model, and they'll be in the office some days and work from home. The same applies for meetings. You and I wouldn't be able to do this without the technology that exists today. I mean, think of what this pandemic would have been if we didn't have technology.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I mean, think about Amazon not being around, Google not being around, Zoom not being around. If we didn't have, internet accessibility throughout the country, mobile networks that were able to support all this stuff, like the world during this pandemic would be a very different and very scary place. And arguably, we would not have rebounded the way that we did because we would be trying to pick up the pieces.
Yeah, you talked about over the weekend, you guys pivoted to let's go test this remote thing out. Companies without all the tools you just described, that was not an option. That would have meant we would have been shut down, literally shut down.
Look at the service industries.
Yeah.
How many local restaurants have shut their doors and are not opening again? The impact and effect in the hospitality industry will take decades to recalibrate back to what their projections were. So
a couple questions that we'll kind of close out with. One is you talked about kind of Q1, Q2 next year, which appears to be when this when we may start to see kind of the foreclosure wave actually hit the shore, right? What do you think that looks like for our industry? I think we're in a completely different cycle than we were, during the crash in terms of where property values are. And do you view what's coming as kind of a heavy hit, or will it be, it's going to be heavy in terms of the number of transactions that have to occur? It just, there hasn't been any for so long, they're pent up. But do you really see it being this massive wave, or with property values where they are, will it be kind of somewhat offset by that?
So I have taken 2 economics classes in business school, which qualifies me to be an economist more than most people on Twitter these days. But all kidding aside, economics and econometric factors are always very interesting, and something I've tried to teach myself as much as possible and look at what history has sort of shown us. I am fully aware of the narrative that the majority of economists have taken, which is, I love economists. Some of my friends at the business school where I teach now are amazing economic thought leaders. But they look at data and spreadsheets, and the one thing that is really important is really appreciating the behavioral aspect of what we're talking about. We are talking about people's homes. We are talking about their homestead, where they live, where their families are, where their kids go to school, their communities. And so I think that, so your question really is like, are we going to see a wave of foreclosure? That's really the question, right?
We're going to see a wave. It's really, how big is the wave? Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for sort of level setting that. So I agree with that. I agree that there is going to be an increase in foreclosures, period. This concept of people have so much equity in their homes now, this is not what we were dealing with back in 07, 08, where I was doing closings where people would state their income, state their assets, tell you that they make $8 million a year, and they were getting approved for these loans. We went from 97% financing, I remember, to 100% financing, to more than 100% financing. We're giving you money to renovate the house that we think you're going to renovate, right? And so, yes, that is certainly a data point. However, if you think about it from the perspective of the persona and the profile of the person that is probably struggling through COVID and is in forbearance now, you are essentially predicting as an economist that because there is equity in that property, that they will make a strategic decision to involuntarily sell the property and take whatever is left of that equity, post real estate commission and so on and so forth, and costs, and move somewhere else, either rent or downsize and so on and so forth. That's a hard pill to swallow when you were looking at where your kids go to school, what happens, and the latency that exists from forbearance until ultimate foreclosure. The one thing that I always tell people is, like, when the music stops in real estate, it's like the bar shutting down. Like, it stops. It's over. And so you get some increased foreclosure activity in a couple of communities or neighborhoods, you know what that does to comps in the area.
Right.
And so that will adversely affect comps. It'll impact that. Now, that's the gloom side of sort of the narrative. But I think the positive piece of this is I do agree that there will be an increase, but I don't think that we will see anything the likes of what we saw during the Great Housing Crisis.
Yeah, I think, and I agree. I think my perspective is the increase we're going to see through a period of time is more about just that these haven't happened for so long. They've been paused, right? So you have situations that otherwise would have happened months ago that have been pushed out 6, 12 plus months, and of course some of those are just going to happen, and those will always happen regardless of the economic cycle that we're in. So,
yeah.
All right. So the last question is, this is how I like to close the podcast here. I guarantee most of my audience doesn't know Costa. They don't know Stabby. Because a lot of our now they will. This is cool. This is what's fun about this. Now they will.
Ryan, you're putting me on the map here.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I'm not even on the map. So how can I put you on the map? Let's give us a little bit about who you are, what you like to do when you're not solving these massive problems for our industry.
Yeah. So all right, I'll tell you who I am. So like where I came. So my parents were both born in Greece. So I grew up speaking Greek. English was a second language for me.
Ligris, right?
Ligris. Yeah, I mean, it's supposed to be like an Opolis or an Akis, but yeah, I got lucky with a short Greek name. So like on my name in school and stuff like that, it wasn't that bad. It doesn't mean the kids didn't make fun of what I was eating. But yeah, so parents immigrated here from Greece, born and raised here in Boston. I'm a science guy. I studied physiology and chemistry at BU, med school dropout that went to law school to be a patent lawyer. Have always been fascinated with sort of processes and structure. And so if I had done it all right from the beginning, I probably wouldn't have gone to law school. Maybe would have become an engineer. I don't know if I'm smart enough to be an engineer, but regardless, yeah, so I went to law school here in Boston and then built title and settlement operations. What makes me tick? I love building things. I'm a builder. And so for me, the best thing in terms of the things that excite me, and I think that's why Josh and I work really well together, is culture is really important. And so, organic growth within our organization, seeing people that I had hired as assistants at a law firm and then mentoring them through and making them lawyers or helping them through that journey of becoming lawyers themselves is something that I love. Because legacy to me is not my name on the side of a building. It's people looking back and saying, like, this is how I learned to do business. This is how I learned to build things. This was a mentor of mine. This was somebody in my journey. And it's something I'm really passionate about. What do I do for fun? I love to travel. So something I enjoy doing is getting on a plane. I worked from Greece this summer for several weeks, which was really fun because I hadn't been able to go over there for several years. But I like to travel. I like to play golf when I haven't torn my bicep tendon, which I have to fix this winter, and then I can play some golf again. Yeah, enjoy going to live music. Something that's been hard, obviously, through the pandemic to be able to go to concerts and enjoy live music. I'm a foodie, and through the pandemic, I have really evolved my cooking skills. And so, cooking for breakfast is like my favorite meal, and one of the things I love cooking breakfast. So I'm excited to get back into some sort of a hybrid office situation where we have a larger kitchen, so that once a month I can actually just go into the kitchen and just cook for the entire team.
I got to get on the calendar. I got to be on the calendar for that.
Yeah, absolutely. My nephews always tell my brother and sister-in-law that their breakfast pales in comparison to what their uncle makes.
There you go.
So, I'll get up in the morning if they're sleeping over, and they'll be like, "Oh, we want shakshuka." I was like, "Yeah, no problem. Let me start cooking some tomato sauce and herbs and Moroccan spices and poach some eggs." So it is something I enjoy doing, and we will definitely, when we get you over to Boston, we'll have you over for breakfast.
Awesome. Well, Costa, thank you so much for joining on Friday here. I know it's early, and appreciate you spending some time with us, helping us get to know Stabby. I'm really excited to see where you guys take this. I know that you're going to conquer our industry, but just understanding your platform, I think that the world's wide open for you across other financial sectors. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you on the conference circuit soon.
Thank you for having me. Really excited and humbled to be here, and I know this has been a long time in the making, so thanks for your patience in getting us together.
Right on. All right, everybody, have a great weekend.
All right, my man. Have a great weekend.